All right, Reverend Mzwandile Molo, SACC General Secretary, joins us now via video link as the world pays tribute to Pope Francis. Thank you so much, Reverend, for your time. So, as condolences continue to pour in, we are already starting to theme together the legacy of the head of the Roman Catholic Church. While, Pope Francis has been described by some as unconventional and controversial in many quarters, fundamentally, he was a man who sought to promote social and economic justice is also one of those key threads we are seeing. Just take us back then to the time for you when Pope Francis was announced as a new pope and what that moment meant for you. I mean, he was also the first Latin American leader of the church.
Good afternoon, my sister, and good afternoon to your viewers. You are quite correct, and for the Supreme Council of Churches, we just want to start by expressing our condolences to the Catholic family throughout the world, in the Americas, in Argentina, but also here in South Africa. We express this because, in our view, Pope Francis was in many ways, in the recent times, the best manifestation of our faith and what our faith can and should be as it seeks to transform the world for what Jesus Christ calls the kingdom of God. You are quite correct. When he was announced in 2013, we were all excited because at that moment we were able to see something fresh, something new that comes from the third world of the world, which reflected new possibilities. And from the moment in which he was announced and the moment of his appearance into the world, where he sought the people's prayers rather than coming into the world as if he's the one bringing prayers, that immediately changed the dynamics of what it is to be a faith leader, committed and yet at the same time dependent on the joint work of both the community and the leader of the community in reflecting who God is in the world. So we as the SACC find it very, very inspirational to have lived through a time of his pontificate where he was able to reflect to the world the best of traditions and the best of our faith.
Now, the Pope had suffered a serious bout of double pneumonia this year. I mean, but his death did come as a shock for many because, a lot of them thought he was on his way to recovery, also given his age. But, he was seen just not too long ago, driven around St. Peter's Square to greet, cheering crowds on Easter Sunday. On the next steps, we are told that the next few days become very crucial. Can you give us a sense, perhaps, on what we're likely to see in the coming days?
In the Christian faith, there is something called that in the midst of life, there is death. In other words, we live with the mystery of life and death as it accompanies all of us as human beings into this world. You are quite correct, my sister, that we as the SACC also didn't only prayed for him while he was in hospital. When we received the news of him coming out of hospital, we continuously prayed for his recovery. And when yesterday he participated in that Easter Sunday service through the blessings, we are all encouraged to see him. Yet, when we were able to celebrate the resurrection of our Christ, we received the news of his passing. And because we are Christians, we are a little bit surprised by that, but at the same time, we are not shocked in that fundamental meaning of that word of shock. We are surprised because we're still hoping for him to be with us, but we're also grateful for the life and the times and the ministry he has shared with the world and how he represented the Christian faith throughout the world in interfaith persecutions, in the cries of the migrants, in the cries of refugees, in him recentering the world away from building walls amongst each other, but building bridges so that we can all cross paths because we all belong into this world as God's created human beings who share a special responsibility with creation and with nature. And because of that faith, our anticipation is that the Catholic family will lead us as it guides us into what is the best thing that can be done through the Catholic. As the Supreme Council of Churches, we are consulting amongst our leaders to come to some kind of understanding of what best we can do to remember this great leader that God has given to the world and to all of us in this country.
And just on that last point, Reverend, I think it is important because also just given what you have been saying about his legacy and just some of the issues that he was able to speak to, maybe just give us that sense then in terms of how should the church then look into the future, especially on legacy issues around what he's spoken about, including, reform in the church, modernization. Should the church reconcile Pope Francis's reformative legacy with those long-standing traditions, because he was able to speak to a number of critical issues here?
It is true that those leaders do not only give us a legacy to celebrate, but also give us a legacy that illuminates our own failing, that critiques our own long-time held traditions. He is part of those leaders, therefore, who leaves us not only with a moment to celebrate his legacy, but for many of us, he leaves us what we call a subversive memory. A subversive memory is a memory that says to you, do not just clap hands for my existence. Allow my existence to critique those things that you are blind at. And he has spoken to many of those things. The Catholic Church is going through what they call the synodical understanding of the church. At the core of that understanding is how do you allow the different parts of the church to speak co-responsibly to one another, so that the priest, so that the bishop, so that the pope doesn't present him or herself as somebody who still stands above people, but God speaking in a dynamic relationship between all members of the church. And that's a powerful symbol of allowing God to speak from below, at the same time allowing those with the responsibility to meditate, reflect on these matters. The issues of LGBTQI plus people, which he has highlighted and raised into the space of the Catholic Church, is important because it allows the church then to evolve as it seeks to be a true witness in our space and time. So his memory is not just about clapping hands. It is about asking, what are we doing for the poor? What are we doing for the migrant? When people come from Zimbabwe, when people come from DRC, when people come from other parts of Africa, when they descend in our country in search of a better life, what are we learning from him into how we can deal with people so that issues of like xenophobia do not override us? The worship of war, the worship of power through militarization is a critical point that the church needs to pick up. In a world now, we hear that those in the West are raising their defense budgets in order, and whilst they are cutting social spending, in order to prepare themselves for a pending war. We cannot go into another world where the race to arms is inevitably leading us to another war in the world. Those are the things he's calling upon us all as the world and as people to reflect on deeply as the church, so that the church is not a reflection of the clerical position, but a reflection of what God is saying to us through God's people in the church.
Absolutely. Reverend Molo, thank you so much for your time and your reflections. Reverend Mzwandile Molo, SACC General Secretary, joining us there just to give us his tribute to Pope Francis. Let's give you a sense then in terms of what is happening on the ground in Rome, and show you those visuals then from Vatican City. Of course, immediately when that announcement was made early this morning, of course, a number of people descended onto St. Peter's Square following Pope Francis's death. Of course, the death of the Pope was announced by Cardinal Kevin Farrell of the Apostolic Chamber after having been confirmed by medical doctors. And just briefly, that statement basically saying, dearest brothers and sisters, with deep sorrow, I must announce the death of our Holy Father Francis at 7:35 this morning. The Bishop of Rome, Francis, returned to the house of the Father.